Let me ask you something. If I told you that one of the most powerful people in crypto started out as a regular guy writing code, living a pretty normal life, and then somehow built the biggest crypto exchange on Earth in less than a year, would you believe me? Because that's exactly what happened. And the craziest part? He didn't come from old money. He wasn't some flashy Wall Street guy. He didn't grow up as a Silicon Valley celebrity founder. He was just a quiet engineer. And somehow, that quiet engineer became the face of one of the most controversial companies in modern finance. That man is Zhao Changpeng. Most people just call him CZ. And if you've spent even 5 minutes in crypto, you've probably heard of Binance. Binance became the biggest crypto exchange in the world. Billions of dollars in daily trading volume, millions of users, massive influence over the entire crypto market. When Binance moved, the industry paid attention. When CZ tweeted, people reacted. That's how powerful he became. But here's what makes his story interesting. This isn't one of those classic kid had a dream and never gave up stories. Honestly, his rise feels more like someone accidentally walked into the biggest financial revolution of the century and moved faster than everyone else. And timing played a huge role. To understand CZ, you need to understand what crypto looked like before Binance exploded. Back in the early days, crypto was messy. Very messy. Bitcoin existed, Ethereum was growing, but the entire space felt chaotic. Exchanges crashed all the time. Trading platforms looked terrible. Customer service was basically non-existent. Security was weak. People were losing money constantly. And many traditional investors thought crypto was a joke. To most normal people, Bitcoin sounded like internet gambling. Governments didn't fully understand it, banks hated it, and the public didn't trust it. But while most people were laughing at crypto, a small group of people saw opportunity. CZ was one of them. But before crypto, his life looked very different. He was born in China, later his family moved to Canada, and life wasn't exactly luxurious. His family had financial struggles. At one point, he worked fast food jobs to help support himself. Imagine that for a second, a future billionaire flipping burgers. That's usually where motivational speakers start yelling at audiences. But that's not even the most important part. What really shaped him was his obsession with computers. He loved coding, he loved systems, he loved efficiency. He wasn't trying to become famous, he liked building things that worked. That mindset would later become extremely important. He eventually worked in financial technology, and this part matters a lot, because before crypto, he was already building trading systems. He worked with software connected to stock exchanges. He understood how financial markets operated behind the scenes. While average people looked at trading like gambling, he understood the infrastructure, he understood speed, he understood execution, he understood how billions move through digital systems. That experience gave him a huge advantage later. Then, Bitcoin entered the picture, and like many early believers, at first it sounded crazy. Digital money? No government backing it? No bank controlling it? Sounds insane. But once he started learning more, he became obsessed. He reportedly even sold his apartment to buy Bitcoin. Think about how insane that sounds. Imagine telling your family, "Hey guys, I sold real estate so I can buy internet coins." Most families would think you completely lost your mind. But that's how deeply he believed in crypto. And belief matters. Because the people who changed crypto weren't casual investors. They were all-in maniacs. Then came 2017, and this was the moment everything changed. Crypto started exploding. Bitcoin prices were flying up. New coins were launching constantly. Everyone wanted in. Retail investors rushed into the market. Fear of missing out was everywhere, and exchanges couldn't handle the demand. This was where CZ saw the biggest opportunity of his life. He realized something simple. People wanted crypto, but the platforms were terrible. So he built Binance. And what happened next was insane. Within months, Binance became one of the biggest exchanges in the world. Then it became #1. That kind of growth is almost unheard of. Most companies need years. Binance moved at rocket speed. Why? Because they solved real problems. Their platform was faster, easier to use. They listed coins quickly. They moved aggressively across global markets. While competitors were slow, Binance acted like a startup on steroids. And CZ became known for moving incredibly fast. In crypto, speed is survival, and Binance mastered speed better than almost anyone. But here's where things get complicated. When companies grow this fast, people start asking questions, a lot of questions. How are they expanding this quickly? Are they following regulations? Who's watching them? Who can stop them? And this is where the story starts getting darker, because crypto was still operating in a giant legal gray zone. Rules were unclear, governments were confused, and companies were growing faster than regulators could react. For a while, that worked in Binance's favor, but history shows that industries without clear rules eventually face consequences, and Binance was getting so big that ignoring them became impossible. CZ went from being a quiet builder to becoming one of the most powerful targets in global finance. And that's what makes his story so fascinating. This wasn't just about getting rich. This became a battle between innovation, money, governments, and power. And that battle would eventually push CZ to places he probably never expected. Massive success, global influence, public criticism, and eventually a courtroom and even prison. The story gets much crazier from here, because building the empire was only the beginning. Keeping it alive became the real war. By the time Binance exploded, people started treating CZ like he came out of nowhere. One day, nobody knew who he was. The next day, he was running the biggest crypto exchange on the planet. And when that happens, people usually create fake stories. They make it sound magical, like he woke up one morning, had a genius idea, and became a billionaire overnight. That's not what happened. The truth is way less glamorous and way more interesting. CZ spent years becoming the exact type of person who could survive crypto chaos. And it started with something most people completely ignore. He understood systems better than people. That sounds harsh, but it's true. He wasn't a charismatic salesman. He wasn't some loud founder constantly chasing attention. He wasn't trying to become the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. He was the kind of guy who preferred staring at trading infrastructure all day instead of being on stage giving speeches. And weirdly enough, that made him perfect for crypto. Because crypto in the early days wasn't polished, it wasn't cool, it was full of technical problems. Servers crashed constantly, trading platforms lagged, people couldn't withdraw funds, security breaches happened everywhere. And most traditional finance executives didn't want anything to do with it. It looked like a disaster. CZ saw opportunity. Before Binance, he worked at several major finance-related companies. One of the most important was Bloomberg LP. That matters because Bloomberg wasn't some random startup. It's one of the most important financial data companies in the world. He worked on trading software there. That means he learned how real financial infrastructure works behind the scenes. Most retail traders only see apps. They tap buttons, buy assets, sell assets. That's it. They never think about the systems processing millions of transactions. CZ understood that world deeply. Later, he worked at blockchain companies before Binance existed. He joined Blockchain.io, one of the early crypto infrastructure companies. Then he worked at OKCoin, and that experience changed everything, because now he wasn't just watching crypto from the outside, he was inside the machine. And what he saw was chaos, massive demand, terrible execution, weak leadership, huge opportunities everywhere. Imagine walking into an industry where customers are desperate and nearly every company is doing a bad job. That's exactly what early crypto looked like. And then he made a huge decision. Instead of staying comfortable, he decided to build his own exchange. That sounds normal now. Back then, it was extremely risky. Remember, this was before crypto became mainstream. There was no guarantee the industry would survive. Governments could shut things down. Prices could collapse overnight. Most serious investors thought crypto was nonsense. Even many smart tech people stayed away. CZ went all in anyway. And this is where his personality becomes really interesting. He wasn't reckless in a loud way. He was calm, calculated, almost emotionally detached. That made him dangerous. While emotional founders panic under pressure, he often looked weirdly relaxed. Even during huge market crashes, even when billions were moving, even when regulators started paying attention, that calm image became part of his brand. Then, Binance launched in 2017, and the timing was ridiculous. Crypto was entering full mania mode. Bitcoin prices were exploding. Initial coin offerings were everywhere. People were throwing money into random tokens with terrible ideas. It was complete madness, and Binance entered at the perfect moment. Their pitch was simple: fast trading, low fees, easy access, more token listings. That's what people wanted, and Binance delivered faster than competitors. They raised money through an ICO using BNB. At the time, many people barely understood what exchange tokens even were. Now, exchange tokens are normal. Back then, it felt experimental, and it worked. The company scaled insanely fast. Millions of users poured in, revenue exploded, and suddenly CZ wasn't just a founder anymore. He became one of the richest people in crypto. And here's where things started changing. When you become rich in crypto, you also become a target. Competitors attack you, media investigates you, governments watch you, and users expect perfection. The bigger Binance got, the harder it became to stay invisible. And CZ had always preferred staying behind the scenes. Now he was becoming the face of global crypto. That came with pressure he couldn't avoid. People started asking difficult questions. Where is Binance headquartered? Who regulates them? How are they moving so quickly across countries? Are users fully protected? At first, Binance kept growing faster than those questions could catch up. But eventually, those questions became impossible to ignore. And the crypto industry was about to enter one of its darkest chapters. Because growth is exciting, power feels amazing, but every empire eventually gets tested. And Binance's biggest test was still coming. By late 2017, crypto had officially lost its mind. And I mean that in the most literal way possible. Everywhere you looked, people were getting rich overnight. Your friend who knew nothing about investing was suddenly giving Bitcoin advice. Random Telegram groups were pumping coins nobody had heard of. People were quitting jobs because they thought crypto would make them millionaires in 6 months. It felt like free money. And when markets feel like free money, people stop asking smart questions. That's exactly the environment Binance entered, and CZ understood something most people missed. This wasn't just a Bitcoin story. This was an infrastructure story. Everyone was obsessed with prices. He was focused on where all that money would flow, and that flow needed exchanges. People needed somewhere to buy, somewhere to sell, somewhere to trade hundreds of new tokens launching every week. Existing exchanges were struggling badly. Coinbase was more beginner-friendly, but had limited listings. Kraken had loyal users, but scaling issues. Bitfinex had its own controversies, and users everywhere were frustrated. Slow approvals, platform outages, terrible interfaces, poor customer support. People wanted speed, they wanted access, and honestly, they wanted gambling disguised as investing. That's where Binance crushed everyone. The platform moved fast, really fast. They listed new coins at a speed that traditional exchanges would never tolerate. Sometimes projects would get listed so quickly that critics questioned whether enough due diligence was being done. But users loved it, because in a bull market, people don't want caution, they want opportunity. Binance gave them exactly that. Then there was the fee structure. Trading fees were low, and if users paid with Binance Coin, BNB, fees became even cheaper. That was genius. At the time, a lot of people didn't fully understand how important BNB would become. They thought it was just another random token. It wasn't. BNB created a powerful ecosystem loop. People used Binance. That increased demand for BNB. BNB's value rose. That attracted even more users. And suddenly, Binance wasn't just an exchange. It had its own economic engine. That model became incredibly powerful. And then CZ made another huge move. He acted global from day one. A lot of companies expand slowly. First dominate one country, then move overseas. Binance basically ignored that playbook. They moved everywhere. Asia, Europe, Middle East, emerging markets. They aggressively chased global users while regulators were still trying to understand what crypto even was. That gave them a massive head start. And let's be honest, many traditional financial companies move painfully slow. Compliance meetings, legal departments, layers of approval. Binance often moved like none of that existed. And in the short term, that worked beautifully. Their growth became insane. Within months, Binance became the largest crypto exchange by trading volume. That kind of growth is almost unheard of in finance. Banks don't scale like that. Brokerages don't scale like that. Even major tech companies usually need years. Binance moved like a viral app mixed with Wall Street infrastructure, and CZ became a legend in crypto circles. People saw him as a genius, a builder, a disruptor, someone beating traditional finance at its own game. But fast growth creates hidden problems, and this is where things started getting messy. When exchanges list huge numbers of coins quickly, bad projects sneak in, scams sneak in, market manipulation becomes harder to control, and crypto already had enough scams. Then there were security concerns. The bigger Binance got, the bigger the target became. Hackers noticed, governments noticed, competitors noticed. Everyone wanted a piece of what Binance built. And then came one of Binance's biggest tests. In 2019, hackers stole over 7,000 Bitcoin from Binance. At the time, it was worth tens of millions of dollars. That could have destroyed user trust. A lot of exchanges never recover from major hacks. But Binance handled it differently. They covered users' losses. Users didn't lose their funds. That move protected Binance's reputation, and it sent a message: we may move fast, but we're not going to let users take the hit. That decision helped keep trust alive, and trust is everything in crypto. Because unlike traditional banks, many crypto companies were built entirely on user belief. If users stop believing, everything collapses. Then Binance expanded beyond trading. They launched new products constantly: futures trading, staking, launch pads, institutional tools, payment systems. It felt like they were trying to become the Amazon of crypto, and in many ways they succeeded. But while users celebrated growth, regulators were getting increasingly uncomfortable. Because from their perspective, Binance was becoming too powerful, too global, too hard to control. And governments hate systems they can't control, especially when billions of dollars move through them, especially when anti-money laundering concerns start appearing, especially when political pressure grows. And CZ probably knew this storm was coming, but he kept expanding anyway. Because in crypto, slowing down often feels like losing. That mindset helped build Binance, but it also planted the seeds for future disaster. Because the bigger Binance became, the louder the questions got. And eventually, those questions turned into investigations.
By this point, Binance looked untouchable. They were dominating crypto. Millions of users, massive daily trading volume, a global brand. And CZ had become one of the most powerful people in the entire industry. From the outside, it looked like he had won. Game over. Everyone else was chasing Binance. But this is where things started getting ugly. Because hypergrowth often hides problems, and crypto was built in an environment where people celebrated growth far more than responsibility. For years, the industry had this attitude: move fast, figure out the legal stuff later. That sounds exciting when prices are going up. It becomes terrifying when regulators show up. And regulators were absolutely starting to show up. Governments around the world were asking the same question: what exactly is Binance? And that question sounds simple, but Binance made it surprisingly hard to answer. Where was the company actually based? Who had legal authority over it? Which country was responsible for oversight? Different reports pointed to different locations, and Binance often operated in ways that felt intentionally flexible. To supporters, this was innovation. To critics, this looked like regulatory avoidance. And that distinction became a massive problem. Then there was compliance, things like anti-money laundering rules, know your customer requirements, transaction monitoring. Traditional banks spend enormous amounts of money on these systems. Crypto companies often treated them like annoying speed bumps. That worked for a while, until it didn't. Regulators began accusing crypto exchanges of allowing risky activity, money laundering concerns grew, lawmakers started paying attention, and Binance became the biggest target because they were the biggest player. Then another major threat emerged: competition, and this is where the story gets even crazier. A young founder named Sam Bankman-Fried started building FTX. At first, many people saw FTX as Binance's biggest challenger, and Sam had a very different public image than CZ. He presented himself as the responsible one, the regulator-friendly one, the polished billionaire. He was everywhere: Congress hearings, major media interviews, celebrity partnerships, political donations. FTX looked like crypto's safe future. Meanwhile, Binance was often portrayed as the wild global giant. And people started wondering, would FTX replace Binance? Would regulators favor FTX? Would CZ lose control of the market? Then everything flipped, and this was one of the most dramatic collapses in financial history. FTX collapsed fast, very fast. Reports revealed massive misuse of customer funds. Confidence evaporated. Users rushed to withdraw money. The company imploded. Sam Bankman-Fried went from media darling to fraud defendant almost overnight, and crypto entered full panic mode. Billions vanished, trust collapsed, and suddenly everyone looked at Binance, because when one giant falls, people inspect the survivor even harder. Some people praised CZ for surviving. Others blamed him for accelerating FTX's collapse after publicly criticizing them. That debate still exists today. But one thing became very clear. Crypto was no longer operating in a legal gray area nobody cared about. Governments were now fully awake, and Binance was next in line. Investigations intensified, regulators dug deeper, questions became accusations, and the stakes got much bigger. This wasn't just about bad headlines anymore. This was becoming personal for CZ, and the empire he built at lightning speed was now facing something it couldn't outrun: the legal system.
This is the part where the story stops feeling like a startup movie and starts feeling like a warning. Because no matter how powerful Binance became, there was one thing it couldn't outscale: governments. And eventually, the U.S. government made it very clear they were coming after Binance. For years, regulators had been building cases, not just in America, around the world. But the United States was the biggest threat because of how much power its financial system has globally. And once U.S. agencies start digging into a company like Binance, that pressure becomes very hard to escape. Investigators were looking at serious issues: anti-money laundering controls, sanctions compliance, user verification systems, whether Binance allowed people in restricted regions to access the platform, and whether the company grew so fast that compliance simply got left behind. That last part is important because this wasn't presented as a classic fraud case like Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. The accusations were different. The government's argument was basically Binance became a massive global financial platform without building enough legal safeguards. And when you manage billions of dollars moving across borders, that becomes a huge problem. Then the pressure exploded. The U.S. Department of Justice launched major action. Other regulators joined in. Massive fines were discussed. And suddenly, people started asking the question nobody thought they'd asked just a few years earlier: could Binance actually collapse? That would have sent shockwaves through crypto. Remember, Binance wasn't just another exchange. It had become core infrastructure for the industry. If Binance failed, millions of users could panic. The entire market could spiral. And CZ had a huge decision to make: fight everything or make a deal. Eventually, he chose the deal, and it shocked the entire industry. CZ agreed to step down as CEO of Binance. That alone was massive news. This was his company, his creation, the empire he built from scratch. And now he was walking away from leadership. But that wasn't all. Binance agreed to pay billions in penalties. Billions! That number alone showed how serious things had become. And then came the personal blow. CZ admitted violations related to anti-money laundering laws. For someone once seen as crypto's untouchable king, this was a huge fall. Think about how fast life changed. One moment, you're one of the richest people in crypto. The next moment, you're standing in court. That kind of reversal is brutal, and it forced people to rethink his entire legacy. Was he a visionary? Absolutely. Was he one of the most effective builders crypto has ever seen? Without question. Did Binance transform the industry? Completely. But did speed create dangerous blind spots? That's where the debate gets uncomfortable. Because a lot of tech founders are celebrated for moving fast.
But finance isn't social media. You can't just break things and apologize later when people's money is involved. That's the lesson regulators wanted the entire crypto world to see. And honestly, they made CZ the biggest example possible. Yet something interesting happened. Binance didn't die. A lot of people expected total collapse. That didn't happen. Users stayed. The platform survived. The company kept operating. And that tells you how deeply Binance had embedded itself into global crypto. Even after legal disasters, it remained enormous. That's rare. Most companies don't survive leadership scandals at that level. But Binance wasn't most companies. And CZ? He was no longer running the empire. But his story wasn't over, not even close. Because after losing power, he had to face a much bigger question. Who are you when the company you built no longer belongs to you?
At the peak of his power, Zhao Changpeng looked unstoppable. He built Binance faster than almost anyone thought possible. He became one of the richest people in crypto. His company processed billions in trades. His tweets moved markets. And for a while, he looked like the ultimate winner of the crypto era. Then reality hit. Hard. Legal pressure, massive fines, stepping down as CEO, criminal charges, and eventually, time behind bars. That's not exactly how most billionaire success stories are supposed to end. And yet, this is where his story gets strangely complicated. Because depending on how you look at it, CZ either lost everything or got away with far more than most people expected. And that's why his story is still debated. Let's be honest, things could have ended much worse. Look at Sam Bankman-Fried. FTX collapsed into total disaster. Customers lost billions. Executives faced criminal fraud accusations. His public image completely imploded. That situation looked like total destruction. CZ's situation was very different. Binance stayed alive. Users still trade there. The platform still dominates huge parts of global crypto. And despite stepping down, CZ remained extremely wealthy. That matters, because in most industries, legal scandals at this scale can permanently destroy a company. That didn't happen here. And that says a lot about how massive Binance became. It became too important to disappear overnight. But money isn't the full story. Power changed, and identity changed. For years, CZ wasn't just running a company. He was Binance. His personal brand and the company became connected. Every decision, every controversy, every expansion move, people linked it directly to him. Then suddenly, that role was gone. And that's a brutal transition for founders. A lot of entrepreneurs build businesses because they want freedom. Then they wake up and realize the company owns their life. Their identity becomes trapped inside what they built. And when that gets taken away, they feel lost. That may be one of the most interesting parts of his memoir. It feels less like victory celebration and more like someone trying to make sense of everything that happened. There's reflection, there's justification in certain areas, and there's clearly an effort to shape how history remembers him. That's normal. Most powerful people want control over their own narrative, especially after public controversy. And this is why freedom of money feels bigger than one man. It represents crypto itself. Think about it. Crypto promised freedom from banks, freedom from governments, freedom from traditional finance. But what happened? The industry eventually collided with reality. Regulation, law enforcement, political pressure, institutional oversight, the same systems crypto claimed it could avoid. That doesn't mean crypto failed. Far from it.
Bitcoin still exists, Ethereum still exists, Binance still exists. But the fantasy that this world could operate without consequences, that fantasy died. And CZ's story became one of the biggest examples of that reality. He moved faster than everyone, built faster than everyone, won faster than everyone, then discovered that some systems move slowly, but they eventually catch up. So did he win? Financially? Probably yes. Personally? That's harder to answer. Historically? That depends on what crypto becomes over the next 20 years. But one thing is undeniable. Whether you admire him or criticize him, you cannot tell the story of modern crypto without talking about Zhao Changpeng.